Hi, welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we are very excited to have Rickard Westman on the show. Got some excellent topics lined up coming from a unique perspective, which is, unlocking potential in organizations with mobs. So kind of looking at things at a bigger meta perspective, and also coming more from a management perspective, as opposed to someone within the mob. So super excited to jump in. But before we do, Rickard, do you mind giving an introduction for yourself?
Yes, sure. My name is Richard. I live in Stockholm in Sweden, and I've been working within product development since probably about 2008 or 2009. Started out as a journalist actually, and kind of was hijacked into product development as head of sports at the biggest newspaper in Sweden. We did a lot of new sports sites. No baseball, sadly. It's not a big sport in Sweden. And then when I had my first kid, I told my manager that no, I can't stay on like this because it takes too much time to be like the head of sports. So I ended up in product development instead, as a product owner, as a product manager for quite a few years. And then after a while, I kind of noticed that the less the more I stay away from the actual decision making within the team, the better the decisions were taken actually by the group, and I became more interested in managing software development teams. And so since what was that? I think it was in 2013 I switched jobs. Started at SVT, which is the National Public Service television broadcast in Sweden, and stayed there for 10 years. And during that period, I helped building the software development department owning the news products within SVT. And they went from like a minor player to number 2 or number 3 in Sweden during that period. So it was a very nice time. After a while, or after 10 years almost, I kind of figured that I needed to move on. I felt that I wasn't learning as much as I used to, and opted for the most difficult thing that I could ever think of, which was to become a consultant. So now I'm a management consultant within a company called the Stellar Collective, which is great. I learn a lot. It's a lot of new challenges, and yeah, currently I'm at the main retailer site in Sweden, actually, for a while still. So yeah, that was short about me. Any questions on that?
No, fantastic. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to ask, so I assume at some point, well, there must have been an established pattern beforehand, and at some point things moved into mobbing. So I'm maybe mainly from your story interested in how did that transition come about from
Yeah. Well, it was at SVT, the public service broadcaster actually, and it was interesting when I started working with the news people there, the news team. We had one team where they were like 10 or 12 people. It was kind of a fairly large team actually, and I noticed immediately that we had some problems with ways of working there. We weren't really communicating with the team. People were sitting a lot with their headphones on, they were waiting for pull requests or whatever, and we kind of, they did their work and we were supposed to glue everything together at the end of the sprint, basically. So I was really interested in how can we heighten the level of communication within the team. And a good friend of mine, a colleague called Jerion at SVT, he asked me if I had heard about the concept of mob programming, as it was known then, or software teaming perhaps nowadays. And I was like, no, I have no idea about what that is. And he talked about it and he told me about it. It felt so awkward and so weird that this could be, more perhaps flexible and more effective. But he also said, well, there is this guy, Woody Zuill. He's in Sweden quite often. Maybe he could drop by. And that's actually where it all started. We brought in Woody for, I think it was 2 days of workshopping with mainly my group, because I felt that I had perhaps the most problems within that team because they were kind of quiet and not really moving forward a lot. But also other teams at SVT. So I think we had Woody for one day, and other teams had him for another day as well, basically. And that's where this transitional change started. Actually, that's when we. Yeah, and you know what Woody is like. He never enforces anything. He just came there. He talked about, we have tried this. This has worked that way. Maybe it might be something to try out. And as you might guess, people were reluctant. This was, I can't remember when it was, but it was perhaps 2016 or 15. So still pretty early days, I guess, for software teaming. I don't know, probably you people at Hunter had done it for a long while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we started in 2012. So by 2016, I think Woody was traveling the world and teaching
Yeah.
others and things like that.
Yeah, most likely. But people were a bit reluctant. It was like, what is this all about, and why should we be doing this? But the only thing I said to my people in my team was like, I'm not asking you to change your ways of working or the way you behave. The only thing I'm asking for you is to take part in this workshop that we're going to do together with Woody, and then decide for yourself whether you want to try this out or not. And it actually stuck almost immediately, which is kind of nice. I mean, they started out, as you probably would assume, running into tricky problem that needed many different capabilities and competences. That's when they would do mob programming. But over time, it evolved actually into like the way of working for most of the teams within the department, actually.
Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Nice. And well, thanks for giving that history. That's super helpful. And I'm guessing from your prior descriptions that there were some immediate effects on the team, but also effects kind of felt beyond the team, maybe at the organizational level. But what were some of the things you saw there?
Yeah, what we noticed over time was that once we got the team up and running and working and actually starting to communicate better, we also immediately saw the effects that you might assume, like, okay, we're putting more stuff into production actually, rather than we did earlier, because we do have more focus on what we're going to deliver, and it was easier for us to make decisions. I think a lot of people also felt, in a sense, safer in the group, that they knew that they could contribute in this way rather than when they were working more alone, actually. But it also helped me realize that we had troubles with the team setup, actually, because what worked very well within the teams didn't really work well between the teams. At that point, at a certain point, we had split that one team that we had into two different teams, and they had a responsibility for different parts of the service that we were building. And at the same time, we also launched like an experiment team to build native apps, which we didn't have at the time. So we had a setup with 3 different teams, and we soon realized that what works well within the team, the collaboration and cooperation, doesn't really work really well when it comes between the teams, because we had created all these dependencies, and over time, when we grew as a department as well, when I left, we had gone from 10 or 12 people to 35 people and 6 teams actually. But so during this whole trip, I mean, this is a slow evolving thing. It's an emerging organization, basically. It's not something we did deliberately or by design or anything. It's important to keep that in mind. But over time, we realized that I mean, you have all those factors impacting the old architecture when we were a bit web-based service, and now we're doing apps as well, and how we're going to handle those dependencies between the old backend and the new front end that we were actually having, stuff like that, and we couldn't really solve that in a good way, actually. And this sounds really simple, and in a sense it might be as well. But what the mobs did, once we had several teams actually using teaming, as their preferred method, once we had that in place, it was so easy to kind of dissolve those dependencies. Because if you have a software team with I don't know, 6 people in it, over here, and then you have this other team with 6 people over here, and this team needs something from this team, then it's very easy to just lend one of those people to the other team, help them out, and they can go back again, and both these teams will continue moving forward. It's a very simple, it's a very simple thing, but it's extremely powerful. I don't think the problem with that is that you need to have the scale. You can't do it just with one team. You probably need more teams that actually prefer using mob as their method. Then that really works out well, I would say. If you get what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that I kind of take for granted in our context, because we ever since I've joined our current organization, where we have where we do teaming and mobbing, is that there are several, right? So there's always been 5+. And when I reflect, it makes me reflect back on at another organization where there was only one mob, and then the rest of the company was the way it was. You're right. You couldn't use that to solve problems, and like the problems you were dealing with, right? Because that's assuming that the other team is open to someone joining them in a mobbing type way, which they're not even mobbing, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, Chris, do you have any reflections on that from the early days in the mob movement when there was only one?
Yeah. Well, that was all of the software developers in our context were all mobbing back then.
Yeah.
There was a period of time where there were multiple teams in multiple departments that were working kind of cross-organizationally, and I'd say that the mobs were maybe much more flexible to lend somebody to another team briefly and then have them come back in and things like that. And then as things grew to 2 teams, then I would just say that the amount of exchanging was experimented with, right? So whether or not people had the desire to switch teams regularly to get context from both often, or stay in one place for a longer period of time, or things like that. But generally speaking, I think things are very flexible in the sense that if somebody on the team is sick and another person's on vacation and there's like one person left, then you might end up being able to just join another mob, or have somebody from another mob join you, and things like that. So I think it's very dynamic.
But yeah, it is actually. But also I think this is like the basis, the very basic part of it, because there are so many other things when it comes to using mob as a method, or perhaps the preferred method, if you have people who would like to do that. I mean, that is the prerequisite, right? Because if people don't want to use it, then you can't use it, basically. But if you do have that, I mean, there are so many other, overseen, like small, I don't know how to call it, but it's like gold almost. I mean, in the best of worlds, you have, at least my experience when I was at SVT, when we had several teams mobbing, we were always focused on what we were about to deliver, right? We rarely focused on what will we be doing next, because that was not important, because we actually had all the people enrolled in the mob. This also meant that our designers, for instance, they had I shouldn't say a lot, they had slack. And that also goes for our Q&A personnel, or developers as well, depending on where they were working in the stack, right? And this slack that was created by using teaming as a method, actually enables us also to create more autonomy to move more power and decision making towards the teams rather than by managers, because all of a sudden they had the possibility to use kind of the freed up time to meet with the other designers if it was a UX problem, for instance. And they could also start addressing who would solve this problem themselves, rather than going to a manager saying, oh, we have this thing, how should we fix that when it comes to the app, because they have this different design thing. It was more like, okay, we can do this because we don't have to be like 100% working with the stuff we're working with currently. The important thing is that we're moving forward, so we have this Slack, so we can actually meet up and talk to the other designers and say, hey, what do you want some help with? I think to me that has been one of the most important insights behind this. I think managers spend way too much time managing people's work, rather than letting people work on what is important and manage their own time in terms of what will be important coming next, if you understand what I mean. And to me, this is really a hassle. After I left SVT and I joined other organizations, which are much more complex, they are larger, so I totally get that. I mean, if you are 35 people, it's still pretty easy, I would say. If you are like 200 people in the software development department, it becomes a lot harder, right? But I think the mechanics are pretty much the same. And I think a lot of that can be scaled as well. I think it scales pretty well, actually. I think probably at some point when you start losing, tight connection to people, it might be difficult. But I've seen instances at SVT where the people from the news department where I worked together with people within the VOD department, the video on demand department, that were also using teaming, and it didn't matter really where you came from, because you got the whole idea behind it.
Nice. That's so cool. Yeah, I guess I've never really thought about it that way before, that teaming and mobbing, it has a natural byproduct of Slack, such that you can respond quickly to bottlenecks, right? So if, let's say, me or Chris has a piece of knowledge that would resolve a bottleneck in another mob, me leaving my mob for a couple hours, a day, a week, or whatever, doesn't stop them. They keep flowing, right? And then I can go help them resolve their bottleneck, and then it keeps going. Where within the last year, I experienced a team that didn't have that flexibility, right? That if you need someone to help resolve a bottleneck, it was kind of like, oh, they're available in 9 months. And we're like, no, we need help now. Like, we're completely blocked. And it was kind of like, sorry, they're available in 9 months. And so,
yeah.
And I think I was so used to just immediate bottleneck resolution that it was shocking. But
I can totally relate to that. I have a great example from after I left SVT. They had this huge release of a new CMS with the team that I was part of setting up. And there were a lot of dependencies, obviously, between that team and other teams, because they were delivering the fronts, right? And a friend of mine who was still working there told me that they had this big release, and they found this bug the evening before the release. And by noon the next day, it was fixed and out in production. And that had involved 3 different teams and the sports editors, which is like, I don't know, 40 stakeholders that were all screaming for this release, right? And I did the maths where I was at the time of that release, and yeah, I think the fastest we could have handled that within that organization would have been 6 weeks, because it would have been reported, it would have been like analyzed. Oh, we have these dependencies to these other teams. They would have, put it in their backlog. They would have done their refinements or whatever they would have done, and it would have taken this whole cycle of 3 sprints basically. So I think it really shows that if you are able to create that culture where you have teams like owning their own problems, being able to align to like the greater good as well, then it can be extremely powerful, actually. Also, I think when it comes to unlocking the potential, a really important aspect that is often overlooked is the knowledge sharing and the domain knowledge that mobbing creates, because you become an expert. I mean, you are an expert in the domain that you're working with and that particular product, but it's so much easier to relate what's going on in the products that are closely related to you, because you visit them every now and then, you help them out, you get an understanding. At least this is what I've seen from my, non-software developer manager point of view, and it's how I have interpreted when I've talked to my developers. But so it creates this more holistic understanding of what is actually going on within the product as far as code is concerned, and that enabled us at SVT at least to involve the teams in setting up the team and product structure. So what we basically did at the end before I left was to ask the team, so given that we do this website for news thirsty consumers in Sweden, and we do this native iOS app and this native Android app, and we own this CMS, we own this live reporting system that we had built ourselves, both the CMS and live reporting, and we had our own push notification system. How should we set up teams? We basically went to the teams and asked them, and since they had this knowledge, collectively, and they had also all been in touch with each other, they were able to kind of draw the lines. Okay, this is where we need an interface between the CMS and the front end. This is that'll be the GraphQL. That'll be owned by the front end people. So we own the delivered data, etc. So I mean, if we had not been software teaming, we never would have had that shared understanding of the product that we had been building. I'm totally convinced of that, because at one time, before we started, really using the mechanisms of software teaming, we had teams more or less fighting each other. We need to do these changes in the push notification system. We are so stoked with all the other things we're doing. We can't do this. Go talk to a manager so they can make a prioritization. It's not a good way of working, actually. So yeah, I don't know. I think it can be a tremendous factor when it comes to this.
Yeah, I think that's I'm glad you point that out, because that's been in my experience too, is that I think mobbing and teaming has a lot of natural byproducts that are positive. And product knowledge is not the first thing I thought of, but it is something that I've noticed that it almost becomes impossible not to learn the domain, because if your mob is full stack, you're involved in the whole domain, and so there's no getting away from it, right? Where before it would kind of be like, hey, I did the pipeline, I did my piece, I'm out, you know what I mean? Or whatever, like is easier to bifurcate your world, which was simpler and more peaceful, maybe in the short term, but led to more chaos later. And so,
I think you're touching upon something that is important there as well, because at one point in time we were about to launch a new team within the news department, a sports team. They had a mission to kind of bring sports back home into the world of SVT, because it had been developed externally for some weird reason, I don't know why. And we figured that was not really optimal. It was very expensive, and we thought we can do this better ourselves, as you always believe, right? And when we started that team, I wanted to do that as an experiment, basically. We had tried out lean. What's it called? Lean. It slipped my mind now. I had another team before that at SVT where we did lean.
Six Sigma, lean software.
Sorry?
Six
No,
Sigma
lean.
or
No. What is it called? When you work together, all together in like the conceptual phase. Lean.
Lean Startup? Startup?
Chartering.
No, it's not lean startup. That's the thing. It's Lean UX. I think
Lean
it's
Lean
called.
UX.
No,
There we
Right.
go.
Lean UX. Okay. Thanks. Like as a method to try to create, this common vision in regards to what we were supposed to build, and we failed miserably. I mean, everything was perfect during the discovery phase because we had all the people, taking part of that. But once we started developing and came back to the real world, so to speak, we were just back in the old tracks. But when we we're about to start up the sports team within the news department, I want to try that out and pair that with software teaming actually. So I got in touch with a great coach, Martin Christensen. I could really recommend him, who helped me set up the whole idea, where we basically had everybody on board to start with. We said that our mission is to be able to shut down the old sports sites, and with everybody on board, I mean we had I think 3 developers, a Q&A, a UX designer, and a product owner, and that was it. So it was a group of 5 or 6 people, and they were all responsible for everything that had anything to do with this team, right? So when it came to product ownership, like how are we going to set up the backlog, it wasn't down to the product owner to do this. It was down to the whole team to do that. When it came down to what kind of how should our test environments look like, it was not down to the Q&A people, right? It was down to the whole team. So they basically didn't do like software teaming programming or mob programming, as you would say in the old days, but rather mob development. The whole chain was actually owned by this team, and that was extreme. And when we hired for that team, we were very clear that we will be doing everything as a team here. You will not be working in your old-fashioned ways. And those who we hired for this team, they all knew about this and signed up for it. And it worked out so well because, I mean, they always had the same mindset. They understood what was going on. They understood where they were in the process. They started the day by asking themselves, so where do we want to be at the end of the day? Okay, and what do we need to do in order to get there? Okay, so obviously there were tons of problems as well. But this team, incorporating design, product ownership as well within the actual software teaming group, became like a model for us how to model other teams as well. So at SVT, basically, the teams within the news department that worked with software teaming incorporated all the roles, not only the developers. I think that's really important to point out, because what you mentioned in regards to product ownership and understanding the product, I mean, it's easy to see it from that angle, where we are from, so to speak. But I mean, it's actually the same thing in the mirror. I mean, you had all the tech people understanding the product as well. Yeah, I was really, really happy with that, because it enables us so much. It became so much easier to understand, why do we need to move this target, or what are we supposed to be doing now, right? Also, things like discussing maintenance, for instance. It's no longer a discussion, because everybody within the group understands that we need to do this in order to have this product working well, right? It's not a discussion whether, should we do product development or maintenance. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well, where if you have the whole system in the room in your team / mob, then titles and separation of roles and all this kind of stuff, it all just kind of fades away. It's just like, well, we need to do it all to get the thing to production. So whatever you need. And I like how you said it's just development, right?
Yeah.
That could be software, that could be firmware, that could be, marketing thinking, it could be lean UI UX, so it's, yeah, I think a different side of that for me is it's really fun to learn all this kind of stuff. There was some safety for me being like, oh, this is my thing, like one piece of that whole thing. But it's really empowering, exciting, happiness generating to see the whole thing come together and be delivered. And you're like,
Yeah.
I was a part of all of that, and now I understand the whole thing. Not that I made a really, really good piston in a good car, I got to see how the whole car was made, so to speak. Yeah. And I guess one follow-up question I have is there's been some mobs I've been in where the product side of the house or certain specialties come and go, and sometimes those people stay. What was your experience? Like, for example, someone who would traditionally be called a product manager or product owner, did they float in and out of the mob, or were they there the whole time? Or someone who came from more of that background, what was their life cycle in the mob, so to speak?
Yeah, at SVT, as I said, it differed slightly between different teams. You could have product owners or product managers that were more or less soaked up in the software teaming process, so to speak. I would say that most of them were really, really close to the teams and were actively participating in mob sessions several times a week, I would say, especially if there were like, corner cases, like how should we handle this? Is this really important or not? I mean, those are discussions that they need to have then, I would say. When it comes to other, like more, what we really struggled with and never really solved was like the numbers people, the analytics department. Partly, I think, because we weren't really able or allowed to hire analysts ourselves because they belong to a different department at the company, right? We also had to try really actively to engage with the editorial staff. That was obviously extremely important, especially for for instance, the CMS team that were building their own like publishing system for the editors. Then we kind of had to drag them into the process a bit, But usually, if we had a need for someone's input, we just told them, "Hey, we would like you to join here," and I mean that works really well, doesn't it? I mean, it's really hard to say no if someone comes and asks for help. I think, usually at least.
Well, also, I think you have the opposite effect too, where for like more trivial interruptions, people people that interrupt more often might say, "Oh, they're in a meeting," or they're like actually getting work done, and so they actually stay away too. So I've seen both effects where offering to help becomes very easy, but also just sneaking up on a single developer and getting them to do something unrelated to what they're supposed to be working on is a lot harder when there's a mob too that's currently like in the flow. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree on that.
Nice. Cool. One follow-up question I have, because we're kind of talking about unlocking potential in organizations with mobbing. So I think we've covered fairly well, at least with some broad brushstrokes, kind of the mob level, and then kind of the management or coordination at that level. Have you, I don't know if, you have access to interactions with, but people even at the higher levels, like maybe C-suite or directors of directors, I don't know how you are all structured, but was there any impact at that level? Or was it just kind of like stuff's getting done and they don't care? Or,
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, and I mean at SVT, which is the main example here, obviously, we were really lucky because the spotlight weren't very much on the news department. During my tenure there, it was more focused on the VOD service because they were, you know, being challenged by Netflix and like these huge giants that they had to compete with. So we were basically able to set up shop the way we would like to. But also, I mean, I know from other experiences later on that it can be hard. People might see, you know, software teaming as not as efficient way of working because people aren't working, you know, they aren't working 100% all the time, perhaps with what is seen as productive. I think it's really hard to combat that in some sense, and I think perhaps especially now when things have been a bit tougher due to all the stuff that's going on in the world, basically, there's a tendency towards more command and control, and yeah, I don't know what to say other than that. I have never been in such a effective environment as the ones where they have actually used software teaming a lot. I think it really helps. I think there are downsides to it as well, and we shouldn't really we should speak openly about that, especially from a managerial perspective. It can be really hard to work with teams that do software teaming as well. And the weird thing is it really shifts focus from the team in a sense to managing individuals instead, because you do have this somewhat set frame for how to interact within the team, right? And then it comes down a lot to emotions in regards to, so me as a software engineer, I'm only doing this little stuff here, and I understand that it's good for the team and it creates value for the company, but I am so good at all this other stuff, and I don't get to do that as I did before. And as a manager, that can be really hard. I mean, it's important, I think, to keep asking questions regards to, so, but how can you contribute to the team? And do you see the value in what you have done? Yeah, I mean, often people say to me afterwards that, I don't know, especially with consultants, if they are expensive as well. I mean, you pay me so much money and I have done so little, but well, could they have done this without you? And they go, nah, probably not. Okay, then. So we're happy. It's like, I mean, yeah, it can be hard. It really can be. I really think so.
Yeah, you know, it's almost like you're coaching someone through a paradigm shift, right? Because they're potentially, if things are like it is in certain parts of our culture where you're at, you're evaluated, and your worth is tied to a lot of very individualistic, isolated ways, right?
Yes.
And
And that is, I
yeah,
think in Sweden that probably is not as great a problem as in other countries or in other
okay,
cultures, but I've actually seen that exact thing happen, I would say.
yeah,
I mean, where you follow up so much on the individual level that you actually impact what the team can contribute with.
sure.
And that can be actually very harmful, I must say. But when it comes to where you started out with the like top level management having opinions in regards to how to be more effective, um, I don't have a good answer to that actually. I mean, hopefully you can point at some numbers. That's what we could do at SVT. We could say that, yeah, but during this period we have done this and this and this, and we've had 0 errors, and we've been able to, you know, and then it was kind of easy sell actually.
Nice. Yeah, another thing that you noted is, I think it's kind of a classic management problem. I'm trying to find the quote. I'm jumping back to something you said a little bit, but it was it control without knowledge? Oh yeah, here it is. This is from the Turn This Ship Around book. And it was saying control without competence is chaos, right? And so I remember talking with someone, they were from a manufacturing mechanical background. And I was talking about, oh yeah, we're empowering the teams to make their own decisions. And he's kind of like, that sounds crazy. Why would you let those people make those kind of decisions? And I'm like, but I think because it's like what you said earlier, in that once they do develop that knowledge from teaming, they do have the capacity to make those decisions. And so it's not control without competence, it's control with competence. And so there is no chaos, right? And so, but I think often I think it's seen, I've gotten the impression that management sees it sometimes as kind of like this blind faith leap into the cliff of trusting the team, right? And so, I just wanted to highlight that.
I see what you mean. I think from a management point of view, it is so important to actually establish that trust,
Right.
over time. But you can't also shy away from the problems that might occur. I mean, one of the reasons why we started out with with software teaming to start with, as I said, was because we had this dysfunctional team and we wanted to try something that might work better.
Right.
And it stuck, right? So it depends on context, it depends on what you're building, I guess, it depends on size of organization. There are so many things that that plays into this. So it's really hard to like make any general conclusions, I would say, in regards to that.
Sure. Nice. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are kind of coming up on time here. So it might be good to kind of close it out, get a couple sound bites. And so before we close it out, is there anything that you would like to plug or share with our audience?
I really have nothing to plug, I must say.
All right.
So no, not really, and not really much to share either. I'm just happy to be around and have this conversation. I hope it was some worth to some people. That would be nice.
Right on. Yeah. Well, I think the more examples that we get and the more we can lean on each other and also just developing the community and getting everybody's experiences out there. I'm certainly very passionate about, and I think it's super valuable. So, thanks certainly for being on the show to do this. Well, okay, so for our audience, if you are looking for what it looks like to go into this from being in a point with no experience in it and then slowly adopting practices like this, or if you know somebody who you might share this episode with them. And for keeping the discussion going as we move forward, please discuss with us in the comments and subscribe, hit the notification bell and all that. And thank you again for being on the show, and to our audience members, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya.